Jessie, alcoholic.
Hey, Jessie.
Hi. Okay, so I guess I'm just gonna share on what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. I will start off by saying this is definitely a little intimidating. It's a very cool experience. Oh shoot, of course my headphones have to be on low. Um, we'll see what happens. So I guess to qualify, I got sober um, September 20th, 2007, 20 years old, with, I don't know, circumstances, I guess, that a lot of us come in with. I've been busted by the police a couple of times, my parents. It just wasn't, I mean, I want to say it was like the ideal situation for me to want to get sober, but I just, at that time, I didn't want to be sober. My family, they were normal enough. My parents were still together. I've got a younger brother and a younger sister who are both, just killing it in life. But for me, that just wasn't, I don't know. I had like a little bit of a different path. I always had kind of like an addictive personality, I would say. My first real addiction was probably television and like video games. I played so much Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis as a kid. My thumb actually got stuck in like this position where it was like a condition they called, traditionally it's trigger finger, because like most people's trigger finger will get stuck like that if they will shoot guns. Mine was my thumb, so I actually had to get surgery because it was stuck. But even then, it was like still an obsessive amount of video games. And I don't know, that could sum up every avenue of my alcoholism, whatever it is, whether it's like watching TV, playing video games, drugs, alcohol, sex. I mean, you could list anything, eating, like I take it to the extreme. And I'm sure other people could probably relate to having a family that just doesn't know what to do with an alcoholic, other than try to treat them however best they know. It was around like middle school when I was taken to see like psychiatrists or psychologists. I'm not really sure. Maybe it was both. They would like try to put me on different prescription medications to see what the issue was. I was put on Wellbutrin at one point because they thought I had depression. But really, I just suffered from this disease of like not feeling good enough or like feeling better than at the same time. It was just always kind of my feeling. Like I never really felt like I had close friends. I never really felt like I could fit in with other people. But at the same time, it was like, I don't fit in because I'm better than these people, or like I'm better than whatever, So it was constantly me separating myself from other people. And that followed me, I want to say, like early on in school, I was really good at school. From like kindergarten into like fourth grade, it was like, I always had good grades. I was always like attentive and whatever. But like for some reason around the fifth grade, things started to change. I was hanging out with like the bad kids. I think it was like middle school when I started hanging out with this girl. Or no, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. It was the summer before my freshman year when I went away to Europe on like a ambassador program. I don't even know how I got to go because at that point my grades like weren't really at the place where like the other kids who were on this trip they were all like really good students. They were all they were fucking nerds, and I wasn't. I don't know how I was on this trip, but I got to go to 6 different countries in Europe. It was awesome. And while I was over there, drinking and using looked so appealing, because we were in countries like Germany where um, the legal drinking age is like 16, and um, everyone on the trip, they were high school age, so they were all, doing what they could to get messed up around the counselor scene. It was on that trip too where we were in England and we were at the Winchester Cathedral, and our tour guide, she was showing us this gravestone um, that I don't know why I mean I know why I remembered the inscription on it, but the inscription on it obviously said a good soldier is never forgot whether he dies by musket or by pot. The only reason I remember that was because it said pot on this guy's headstone, and I thought that was hilarious because he died by smoking weed in my mind. But obviously that wasn't the case. And this was like right before I started my relationship with drugs and alcohol. This was before I had any interest in doing that, because growing up, like we were taught, don't do drugs, drink alcohol, do anything like that. Like I was a dare kid. I just thought that was never going to be my story. But once I went on this trip and everyone was getting messed up, it just seemed like fun for me. Or it seemed like it would have been fun. So as soon as I got back from that trip, I didn't do anything on that trip because I was too scared of like being sent home or anything like that happening. But as soon as I got back, like I found this girl that was in church choir with me. That was one of the things. I grew up in Texas, the Bible Belt. Everyone did church church choir, everyone did church Bible study, that whole sort of thing. So I don't know how I seem to like know who's like the person to go to with weed. It was always my kind of like spider sense that I could find like, oh, you could probably get me really fucked up. So I found the one chick in church choir that could like get weed. And we smoked at her house. I got high my first time, which isn't always everyone's experience, I guess, but it was mine. And it was off and running from there, for the next, I think I was like 16 when that happened. For the next 4 years, it was just like any drug I could get a hold of, I did, and I'm very fortunate that I didn't get a hold of every drug that I could have done because I would have done it. I got arrested like 3 or 4 times. I got sent to different programs. I got sent to one program that was co-created by Dr. Phil. That was it was supposed to be like a weekend thing where they didn't want us to smoke cigarettes, and I was like, already, this is bullshit. That's not going to happen. I had no desire to get sober, but every reason to, I guess, because at that point I had been arrested, probably like my second or third felony charge of, it was just drug possession. But in Texas, they have like a strict zero tolerance policy. I had already been arrested for DUI at that point. My parents had had enough, so they sent me away to a wilderness treatment center where the very first thing I read out of the big book was Bill's story. And on the first page, it was the same inscription where it's like, here lie grenadier who caught his death from cold small beer. And I read that and I was like, holy shit, maybe this was my higher powers way of like trying to tell me back then, don't go down this path. It's not going to end up good for you. But, being the good alcoholic I am, I found the kids that were making Pruno in the Wilderness Treatment Center and continued to get fucked up, even in treatment, where I'm like, I don't know, hundreds of miles away from any kind of civilization. I will find a way if that's what I want to do. And so it took another program. I met with the counselors. They were like, okay, so you can either go home or go to another program, what they called like aftercare, because I'd only been there for a month and a half. And I told my parents that I was fine to come home. I would just probably smoke weed occasionally. They weren't sold on it, so they sent me to this other program where I spent the next 2 years just going to meetings, talking programs. Like they said, eat, breathe, and shit program for like 2 years, and that's pretty much what I did. I still did not want to be sober at that point. By the end of it, it took me probably a year to get rid of the obsession. It, I mean, no, the obsession probably went away a little bit earlier than that, but it was just like I think it took about a year until I was like ready to just say, you know what, I can't get fucked up right now. Maybe someday in the future, but it can't even be a thought in my mind. But I was miserable probably for those first 2 years just because I did not want to um, do anything in my personal program. I didn't want to do the steps. The first exposure I had with the steps when I was in the wilderness treatment program, they gave us a it was like a step packet or something weird like that because I don't know, I guess some programs do that. And one of the questions in the step packet was to draw your higher power, which I thought was the stupidest thing I'd ever heard. But regardless, it was part of the assignment and I had to do it. So I drew nothing on the page, handed it in, and he was like, "What is this?" And I told him to look closer. Obviously, there was nothing on the page, and he's like, "There's nothing there." And I'm like, "No, just look closer." And he's like, "I don't see anything." I'm like, "That's the spirit that's within everything." And it just blew this dude's mind. And I mean, I thought it was pretty funny, but I just, I thought everything God related and step related was just such bullshit that I don't know. It took the experience for me just to get into a place where I was so miserable doing what I'd been doing and being the person that I was that ultimately I had to try something different. And what that looked like for me was a lot of bullshit going through my step work. There were a lot of things like my fourth step. I was not completely honest on it like the first 2 times that I did it, just because there were so many secrets that I was holding on to. There was so much shame, there was so much guilt surrounding anything that I would have put on a fourth step, and I just didn't have a sponsor that I felt comfortable with. My first sponsor, it just wasn't time for me to do all that. He was like really cool about like giving me space and like giving me the opportunity to do that myself, but I wasn't ready. My second sponsor, he was like 80 years old and I had no connection to him. I thought he was great. I thought he had a lot of sobriety, but it just felt like I was talking to my grandfather when I was talking to him. I did not want to get honest with that man. And it wasn't until he fired me because he knew that I wasn't doing anything in my program that fire was kind of lit under my ass. I was at a meeting and my friend was asking me like, what's going on with you? Do you even go to meetings anymore? Do you have a sponsor? And I was like, no, why don't you be my sponsor? Kind of threw it back on him, which was awesome because he had like a couple more months than me, but he really opened the door to me like finally being able to be honest with people and myself and like actually start to grow in this program. I white knuckled it for like the first 2 or 3 years, which sucked. But like when I finally started doing the work, things changed. I started saying yes to commitments, instead of like having the one friend that I had to go to meetings with, because I usually just had one friend until they would get loaded, and then I have to find a new friend. I started doing other things in my program and in my life. I started saying yes to like speaking. I started saying yes to giving people and to going to different events. one of the things that I got pulled onto was being part of a young people's committee, which has helped tremendously in my program because like I'm not naturally like an outgoing person. I'm not naturally someone who will be of service. But that gives me an opportunity to do that like on a whole different level where like normally I wouldn't do it. And it's been great since then. I'm not going to say that like there aren't still problems in my life today. Like but it's like normal life stuff that comes up now. It's for the longest time I always thought like, what am I doing wrong? What's happening? And at some point I just had to realize, this is life, like one way or the other. And like it's not going to be any better if I choose to like pick up and take a drink and get loaded, because I know for me in my experience it only gets worse. Life is hard as it is, and I don't need anything else making it harder. If I were to say anything today, I mean, my life's not perfect on paper today. Like I'm working like three part-time jobs, just trying to figure it out, but at least I'm like headed somewhere, as opposed to like um me when I was out there, just doing anything I could to survive, like mentally, and like just this overwhelming assessment every day. That's what I had to do, was find some way to get loaded, and anything else, is like extra. Like if I have a relationship with my family today, or like if I have friends, like that's not what it's like today. My life isn't centered around getting fucked up. It's like a peace of mind serenity that I never thought I wanted, or I never thought I needed. But now that I have it, it's like hard to imagine my life being any different today. And if that's what you're looking for, that's what this program has to offer. I can't say that like you're gonna get all the cash and prizes ever, just because that's been my experience. I feel like if you work for it, that can be your experience. But for me, what I found by doing the work in this program is that like peace of mind serenity, that like, you know, if things come up, I have tools to deal with it. And I don't know, like hopefully one day it works out for me, but who knows? At least, I can hit the pillow at night knowing that like I don't have that life. So with that, I will shut up. Thank you for letting me share.